Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Crook-Stratton, and I'm here with a special edition of our podcast. I'm on site at the 79th Annual Convention of the National Congress of American Indians. NCAI, as it's called, is the oldest and largest organization comprised of tribal governments. Its mission is to preserve tribal sovereignty and treaty rights, protect the cultures of Native Americans and Alaska Natives, and educate the American public about Native peoples. I've been honored to serve as one of NCAI's regional vice presidents, representing the Midwest. The annual convention moves across the country every year. This year, it's in Sacramento, California. I took a few minutes during the convention to catch up with other Native leaders and talk about what's important in tribal communities today. I'm here with Frank Ramirez, National Director of Governmental Affairs, Office of the National Commander, National American Indian Veterans, Inc. Hi, Frank. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. Fine.
Thanks so much for being with us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my name is Frank Ramirez. I'm an elder. I'm going to be 79 pretty soon. My tribe is the Lipan Apache out of Texas. I live in Sacramento. I worked in government for 35 years in a ton of areas. And my last 12 years, I did governmental affairs for the state university system. And I've been working with Indian vets forever. I retired in 1999. I got involved in doing what we're going to talk about a little bit, the recognition of a American Indian, Alaska Native, and Hawaiian Indigenous Veterans Organization. Never been recognized by Congress ever. And we've been in every war. We have a high percentage of veterans, more than anybody else. We have Medal of Honor recipients, but we've never had Congress recognize one American Indian, Alaska Native, or any Native veterans organization. This will be the first time, and I'm so happy that finally we got on first base.
Frank, you've been working for about 18 years, I believe you told me, on getting a Native American Veterans Organization recognized by Congress. Can you tell us a little bit about the process?
Yeah, we actually started years ago with Senator Daniel Inouye from Hawaii and Senator Nighthorse Campbell from Colorado, who's actually was born and raised in Sacramento, California. And they said, you guys need to get recognized. And we started the process. It's been a long process. And you talk about the lonely trail, but I never gave up. And, to young people, you have to persevere. It's not always an easy trail. It's not always, I think, as, I don't know who, maybe it was Martin Luther King said, justice has a long arc. And sometimes it takes a long time before the light bends back. And the light has finally bent back, and Congress is going to recognize us as a congressionally recognized veterans group, Native American. First time ever since the beginning of the U.S.
Can you tell me a little bit about just how that makes you feel personally as somebody who served and a vet himself?
It's to be recognized by Congress. It makes me feel 100% whole. I feel for all our vets that came and passed before me, all the wars, World War II, Korea, and for them not to be recognized by Congress officially. Now, they were recognized, but to have an organization that's recognized as being congressionally recognized and supported by Congress, I don't know how to say it. I'm elated. And for everybody that's crossed over from our land, I want to thank them for being now recognized. They may have been here 10, 150, 200 years ago, but I'm proud that they're recognized now.
Well, Frank, thank you so much to your dedication to this issue. Thank you for your service. We appreciate everything you do, and best of luck as you move this through.
Yeah, and for all our young vets, persevere, never give up. Sometimes the light of justice is long, but I think Martin Luther King said, justice does bend. And so be patient. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here with Greg Maston, Vice President of Tribal Nations Engagement and Special Projects with Native Americans in Philanthropy, here to talk a little bit about the Tribal Nations Initiative. Greg, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's nice to be with you.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a member of the Yurok tribe, which is based in Northern California. I'm also a descendant of the Hupa and the Crook peoples. I come from a family of tribal leaders. Both of my parents were chairs of their tribe. So my whole life, I've grown up and really learned to understand and appreciate the challenges that our tribal communities face and why it's so important for us to come together and every one of us do what we can to help better that.
So you're with Native Americans in Philanthropy. Can you tell me a little bit about that organization?
Yeah, so Native Americans in Philanthropy has been around for over 30 years. We serve as kind of a base or central hub to connect the philanthropy world to Native peoples. So we have a really strong history of working with Native serving organizations and Native communities. And we now have a new piece called our Tribal Nations Initiative, which we're wanting to see more investments into our actual tribal communities, tribal nations, their initiatives, their programs. We feel like that philanthropy has a massive opportunity to increase their support of Native peoples. Historically, out of all the philanthropic dollars that went out last year, which was over $400 billion just in the United States alone, less than 0.5% is going to support the first people of this nation, Native peoples. So we feel like through awareness and education, and now through this new platform, the Tribal Nations Initiative, where we're going to create actual programming and collaboratives, and even vehicles for investments to support various initiatives within Native communities, we want to shift that dial.
And so you're here at NCAI this week, National Congress of American Indians annual conference. What are you hoping to do while you're here, and how is being here going to help further your initiatives you're working on?
Yeah, so National Congress of American Indians is like the main conference that we go to really connect with our tribal leaders. It's the main platform, and they work on so many different issues, whether it's education or land issues, all the different policies that need to address those things. And so we're working on just trying to inform and educate on the opportunities of where philanthropy can kind of come in and help support these. This morning we presented at the Climate Alliance panel and talked about our Tribal Nations Conservation Pledge and Fund that we're working on right now. So that's direct investments into supporting tribal communities and tribal nations and their work. We also shared with them a new partnership that we're working on with the Department of the Interior, and looking at supporting more public and private partnerships, and where federal dollars can be leveraged, and or where philanthropy can come in and be more creative in meeting some of the needs of our Native communities.
Fantastic. What do you look forward to most about being at NCAI?
Just being with Native people is always just so, warming to your heart. We're out in this world, and we're dealing with just different worldviews. And I just love being around my family and friends and relatives. And no matter where you go across the country, it feels like Native people are always just Native people. You can just sit and laugh and talk about home.
I couldn't agree more. I love NCAI for that reason also. Greg, thank you so much for being with us and sharing a little bit more about your initiative at Native Americans in Philanthropy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm here with Executive Director of NCAI, Larry Wright, former chairman of the Ponca tribe. How are you doing today, Larry?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
You bet. I was tribal chairman of the Ponca tribe, Nebraska, for 11 years, and served on council just shy of 18 years altogether. And before that, actually during that time, I was also a secondary social studies teacher. Taught government politics and civics and a couple of history classes here and there. And when that wasn't enough, I went back and got a master's degree during that time. And my time off of council, I started a general contracting business. So still trying to figure out what I want to do. And all of those things have really helped prepare me for this role.
Well, this week is a really important week for NCAI because it is the 79th annual conference. Can you talk a little bit about NCAI and its role in Indian country?
Yeah, our 79th year, we've been defending sovereignty since 1944. And really, the mission of NCAI from its inception is still relevant today, and is still as important today as it was when our ancestors formed this organization to defend sovereignty on all levels. And we know time and again that attack on our tribal sovereignty and all of Indian country is still prevalent, and we continue to have new cases that come up to erode that. And NCAI role in defending that is really listening to our tribal nations, our tribal leaders on actions that we need to be in front of to take the lead on, working with our sister organizations as we all help in this space, but really take the lead and be the organization that Indian country looks to, that the administration and Congress look to. And we're, again, listening to our people to tell us what they want, and we carry that out. And so that work is never ending. It just evolves. And so it's such an honor and a responsibility to be part of that. And I know working with our executive committee, listening to tribal leaders, they want NCAI to be out in front, and that will continue that mission.
Can you tell us a little bit about what some NCAI's top priorities are right now? Yeah,
right now we have the Brett King case that's coming up in the Supreme Court that's critical for Indian country and our next generation. That the potential effort to reverse Congress's law that protects ICWA and enforces ICWA and really is an attack on our most precious resource, and that's our children. And if the Supreme Court reverses that, that has a generational effect for our people. It affects our future culture and language and traditions. And we've seen what the impact was on Native nations before ICWA was in place. And we can't go back to that. And that's one piece to this. We continue to fight for VAWA and the Castro Huerta case.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you tell me what VAWA stands for?
I'm sorry, the Violence Against Women Act, and all of those issues. And then by extension, we have this new case with the Castro Huerta decision and the impact on jurisdictional issues by states into our reservations and our tribal nations. And so all of these things have a dovetail, all connected, and the uncertainty of Supreme Court decisions in these laws is just something that Indian country is not going to sit back and let happen without a fight.
NCAI has a lot of partners across Indian country. Can you kind of talk about some of the projects and things that you work on with some of the partner organizations?
Yeah, and like the National Indian Health Board, there's so many. The in the Indian Gaming Association, NARF, Native American Rights Fund, National Indian Education Association. So on the national level for those organizations, it's important for NCAI to be a strong partner and work with them on their specific issues. But every one of those is an extension of sovereignty. And so when we look at education sovereignty when it comes to NIA, our sovereignty when it comes to our healthcare and what's guaranteed to tribal nations in treaties and the trust responsibility and the land that we gave up for those rights. And so and then the Native American Rights Fund and its efforts to help be a partner, a strong partner for all these years to help defend these cases as well. And then you get into other organizations that deal with housing, that deal with the ICWA, our Indian Child Welfare Act, and many others. And there's growing numbers. But how do we help partner, build those relationships, elevate those voices, and have what the mission of NCAI is to really bring that together and be a partner they can all count on. And and that's at the direction of our leadership in our member tribes who help guide the direction that NCAI takes.
I think that's a great example of the importance of NCAI and bringing everybody together. A lot of our listeners might not know about the National Congress of American Indians and really the scope of work they do, but I think that was a great example of showing how much NCAI means to Indian country.
Yeah, absolutely. And, NCAI can't do it alone. And I think it's very important that we make sure that all of our organizations know that, all the tribal nations know that we don't operate in a void, and it has to be a coordinated effort. And we have to work with, not only those organizations, but even our intertribal organizations of our regions who look at specific issues within their region. And we know that if one region's dealing with that issue, it might be a little different from another region, but it could be a very similar issue. And so are we reaching out to those intertribal orgs and their directors as they have the day-to-day contact with tribes in their region? And that helps magnify the voice, magnifies our efforts to really be on top of it, be proactive, and not wait for decisions to be made by the courts or Congress, and helps us have those conversations and have a plan on how we want to fight and and make sure that we're at the table when those decisions happen.
So this week is the annual conference, and there's a lot of things going on. Lots of sessions, lots of the events, listening sessions, that sort of stuff, consultations. What are you most looking forward to this week?
You know, it's really the face-to-face. And when you get so busy planning and doing the logistical, all the logistical issues that need to be involved with this, and our staff is tired of me saying this, but I've compared it to like making sausage. And so all that behind the scenes stuff to get ready for the forward facing event. And when you see tribal leaders here and people who've been involved with NCAI for many years, who are lifetime members and have seen the ups and downs, and it's exciting to be here now. We've been in some challenging years for sure, but know that with the support of our executive committee and the direction that we want to go in to continue to be relevant and be strong. And that's really it. And as we prepare to get into our 80th year and see the tribal leaders come together and have these conversations and be part of them, really just reinforces why we do what we do and why people come here to have those kind of conversations and help guide how Indian country wants to react to what's being forced on us still after all these years, but in how we're going to respond. And so they hear that and see that and be part of those conversations after so many years of COVID, and people, just are rejuvenated, it seems, to be back here. So far we've seen that, and just excited to see what the week brings us.
Fantastic. Well, Chairman Wright, thank you so much for being with us, and good luck at the conference this week.
Thank you very much. Look forward to it.
I'm here with Chairman Mark Macaro, chairman of the Pechanga Band, located here in California. He is also the first vice president for NCAI. Thank you, Chairman Macaro, for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. Yam, I'll say to everybody. Would you like to start?
Yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am the tribal chairman for the Pechanga Band of Indians, and I serve together with 6 other members. Together, we've comprised the tribal council for our band. We're elected in 2-year terms, and we're at the front end of a term that started in August. So as far as myself, I have 4 kids. My wife is Holly Cook Macaro. She's from the Red Lake Band of Ojibwe in northern Minnesota.
It's always good to know a little bit about our tribal leaders. So okay. I think, Indian country has a lot of issues facing them right now. And, here at NCAI, it's a place to talk about and address some of those issues and devise strategy on how Indian country is going to address those. In your region, what is, one of the most pressing issues that your tribes are concerned about?
I think something that underlays everything that we deal with is a relative invisibility. I know that in this day of social media, and there are efforts being made with entities like Illuminative that are trying to change the invisibility. TV shows that we've seen are definitely helping that. But it's still there. Just last week, there was a Discover magazine article that I saw online, and it was talking about these discoveries being made, I believe it was in Lake Powell, and I think a portion of Lake Powell called Hughes Canyon. Now, I knew nothing about this before I saw the article, but the article references that with the lower water level due to climate change and lack of rain, there are these ancient sites that are being exposed now. And there was a line in particular that caught my eye in the article, and it's that these sacred sites were regarded as sacred by the Indian people who they belonged to. And it referenced, I think, Navajo and Hopi, among others. And it continued to speak throughout the article in the past tense about how these sacred sites were regarded as sacred by the tribes. And I thought even with the prominence of probably one of the largest tribes in the U.S. being the Navajo, this magazine is still talking in the past tense as if we don't exist anymore. And I do realize that they were talking about how maybe they're not in that location anymore, but the sites are still sacred. I know wherever our tribes were evicted from, wherever our people have been evicted from, where we were, whether it's our place of origin or where we were for thousands of years, and then we got moved by eviction or some other means, where we were, those things are still sacred to us, and we advocate for them, we protect them, and the fact that a lot of people don't realize that still is a problem, and it colors, I think, when coming to the present moment for things like our battles to protect ICWA, to protect our children, and they wonder why are tribes. I mean, do we have tribes, and why are they asking these questions about trying to keep the children when these parents over here clearly will give their children a better life? And, they don't see, it's like they don't see us. And, or they pretend that they don't anyway, and they continue to use these arguments. So I think that's a challenge for us to continue to work on, to overcome and create that visibility so they cannot deny they cannot deny law, they cannot deny us and what it is that we need to do to protect our people, our lands, our religion, our culture.
I absolutely agree. The invisibility of Indian people is, I think, something that is definitely on the high priority list for tribal leaders to address. And that's one of the reasons we host this podcast, is to kind of lift that veil of invisibility. So what are some things your tribe is doing to address that?
So where we do have visibility, and it sometimes involves our gaming activities. California has over 65 tribes that have gaming, and sometimes that creates its visibility. In this particular moment, there are efforts on the current ballot where we are. This is, I think we're right at the end of October. This is, in fact, Halloween, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And the election is on November 8th. And the California ballot has two measures dealing with sports betting that would affect tribes. One measure is tribally sponsored, and it is losing. And then that would legalize sports betting in our tribal casinos. There's another ballot measure that is brought on by DraftKings, FanDuel, and a whole bunch of others. And that would legalize sports betting for everybody, not just tribal casinos, but the card rooms, the horse tracks, and other entities, of course. The firms themselves, DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, and that one's going to lose by a huge margin. But so there's been this visibility, probably not the best visibility, because there's been some negative arguments against tribes statewide in these campaigns, and then what happens though is that people tend to have short memories. The campaign's over, the ads will stop, and people will kind of forget that this campaign happened. And so if there's something else 2 years from now, they will likely not remember the ads here. So that's one arena where tribes come into visibility. There's another, I would like to think that our proceedings here this week in California will create some positive visibility for tribes here in the state as well as nationally. And often it does. NCAI has a profile in and amongst governments in the United States, even though we are an association of tribes. But there is a gravitas that we have that I think when we do what we do as tribes under the NCAI banner, it is newsworthy. And the things we're going to be discussing are things that attract attention. I think the confluence between our proceedings this week and in the middle of next week with the Brackeen case being heard in the Supreme Court will create that kind of visibility, by the way. One of the things on NCAI's agenda this week is also discussion about a case out of Oklahoma that is also in front of the Supreme Court, will be, and that's the Castro Huerta case. And those discussions, I think, will create the kind of newsworthy visibility that often gets generated.
I agree. NCAI is a great platform to increase that visibility. So despite all the issues that Indian country face and the lack of visibility, our communities are resilient in so many ways. And, I think it's always good to think about, what are our hopes and dreams, or what are your positive outlooks on what's going on in Indian country right now?
A lot of the hopes and dreams, certainly for my tribe, revolve around I think our younger generation. Certainly the tribe, loosely, most people refer to as the millennials. Those, in my head, I think seem to be early 30s and younger. Certainly, we have a cohort amongst our tribal members for real strong and boisterous advocacy of issues that are different from from my generation, as well as from my predecessors, my parents' generation. For instance, I am the chairman of the Pechanga Band of Indians. Pechanga Band of Indians. A year ago in November, our name was officially changed to that. For the 20 years prior, we were the Pechanga Band of Luiseño Mission Indians. Now, we have dropped, obviously, Luiseño and Mission. Both of those names refer to our time as slaves under the Mission San Luis Rey. And our millennials are the ones that not only question, why are we still identifying as the descendants of the slaves of Mission San Luis Rey, as Luiseños and as Mission Indians? And there really wasn't a good answer to that. And it really seemed that the time had come, as well as the political will internally for my tribe to say, hey, we don't have to be a colonial tribe in name anyway. We can change it. And so in the short term, that is our name right now. However, there's still dissatisfaction that that's not going to be our permanent identifier. We need a name that really taps into our language and who we are in our language, because that's our expression to the rest of the world. And that's we've kind of already gotten there on sentiment as far as our tribal membership goes. Politically, we need to take the next step and create the action to resolve to do that, and then inform the United States that we've changed our name one more time. But when we do, it'll certainly be permanent, and it'll likely be some variation of Pechanga Tribal Nation or Pechangayam Payomkawichum. And Payomkawichum, that's the word for who we are as a people on our land. We're the Western Indian people.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I think that's an example of considerations tribes are making kind of all over the United States, because a lot of our names don't reflect our traditional names and values. So
Absolutely.
Congratulations on creating that conversation and making that change within your community.
Well, certainly our millennials brought it to us, and they engaged us, and it was very positive and constructive, and they carried the day.
Well, before we wrap up here, is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
Well, just a bit more on language. With my tribe and many of the tribes in California, certainly that I see all around us, we've made significant inroads in terms of as I heard recently, language preservation, and which I corrected to say language usage, language revitalization. We have a bilingual elementary school. By the way, we have our funeral songs. I'm a singer of our funeral songs. We have our millennials, which I referred to, and they've been very hungry for our knowledge that is in our songs, in our culture, in our language, and stuff that has been dormant for a generation or two, certainly at least. And they have not only taken on the responsibility of learning these things, but of using it daily. And it's amazing to see. And this isn't just with my tribe. This is with many tribes throughout the state. And I think, for instance, in the Culture Night today, coming up on Wednesday, you will see a lot of this on display. The bird songs, which had dwindled to just a few singers 30 years ago, are now thriving in many groups and groups of singers throughout various reservations in Southern California. And it's wonderful to see this renaissance, this growth, and a lot of it ties into our language. And there are just certain things that can't be expressed other than in our language. Certain things can't be done other than in our language. We can't sing our songs in anything but our language. And you have to know what the songs are saying when you sing it. So it's really in depth when people, our youth, our young folks are learning these things, because they're the continuity to the next generation and the generation beyond that for carrying us forward. And that is, it's empowering for us as tribal peoples here, when so many did so much to try to make us disappear, yet we're here and we're thriving with this, once again, our culture and our language. And so I want to see what the next year and the year after that continue to, as it unfolds, what it presents to us, because it's hopeful and it's encouraging.
That's a beautiful example of the resilience of Native people. And I think it's also inspiring to think that our youth are really stepping up to the plate and doing what they need to do. So Thank you so much, Chairman Maccaro, for being with us today. And I hope you have a great day and enjoy the conference.
Everything will be fine. Everything will be good. Thank you.
Today I'm here with President Shannon Holsley of Stockbridge, Muncie. She is also the treasurer for the National Congress of American Indians. Shannon, thanks so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you very much, Rebecca. It's an honor. It's such a good feeling to be among so many wonderful and beautiful natives and our allies and so many people that are gathering here in Sacramento this week to just really uplift each other and to remind us about our resiliency and our strength.
I completely agree. It has been a fabulous couple days already. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. I serve as our tribal president. I'm serving my 4th term. However, I've served on for my tribal government over the past 17 years, in between going to graduate school and doing other things, just to prepare myself for this really significant role, especially at a time in the 21st century where we are so challenged as Indigenous communities and the invisibility around who we are, but we're also able to amplify our voices as political bodies. I know a lot of people don't realize that we're not Native American communities are not just race-based, but we're politically based also. There are over 574 federally recognized tribes that engage our federal partners for their to uphold our trustee obligations, but also an important reminder for a lot of maybe your listeners that tribal nations are not sub-sovereigns to states, that tribal nations have that unique political position that they take as their own self-governing sovereign nation.
And I think that is a really good point to remember. And I think when we talk about the National Congress of American Indians and their role in being that partner and liaison, can you talk a little bit about, the organization and its importance in Indian country?
Absolutely. We are the longest and oldest standing Native American policy-based organization. We're coming up on 80 years next year. We were established in 1944 with just very simplistic core missions to uphold and defend our trust and treaties. But also it is a platform by which we're able to educate people of who we are as Indigenous people and the unique gifts that we bring to the world. It is also an opportunity to build future succession within our tribal nations. I think our youth represent the brain trust of who we are. And I think every opportunity we have to build upon them is really good. In the past several years, we've had a phenomenal board that really acutely focused on investing in our youth, not just talking about we support our youth, but in a more actionable way where we have a youth council where they serve and they have parity to the board itself in engaging and sort of identifying the future challenges as youth that they face as Indigenous people and helping align those goals and priorities so we as a National Congress of American Indians can grow into the future.
Absolutely. There's a lot of different topics on the agenda for the conference this week. What are some of the things that you think are the most important that tribes should be focusing on?
Absolutely. Well, this year's theme is defending sovereignty since 1944. And I always tell people sovereignty is not a noun, it's actually an adjective, and it's intended to be actionable. As Indigenous sovereign nations, we have the ability to influence outcomes and programs and services and things that we receive through our trustee obligation. And so it's critically important. I sit on the VAWA task force with Dr. Wana Mahal-Dixon, and we had our task force meeting yesterday. And, one of the interesting things is as we made the correlation of how these oppressive practices and challenges that we face in Native communities, especially as it relates to violence against women, but not just women. I think a lot of people don't realize that the violence that's imposed upon our people more often than not is actually of our LGBTQ communities as well. It's not just monolithic or just isolated to women, that it's collective. So we talked about the interplay of how Castro Huerta is being looked at we have a significant Supreme Court case that's going to be heard next week, Brackeen versus Halland. And it really comes down to an actionable authority of who has authority on Indigenous lands and how people are imposed if they are, when there is crimes against our citizens. Who has those jurisdictional authorities, or even in Brackeen versus Halland, about ICWA, which Indian Child Welfare, it was established many, many decades ago, and it's perceived in America as the gold standard. And essentially, what that means is that as Indigenous communities, before children are adopted, there is an attempt to reconvene or to make sure that that child is put back in a home, because as you well know, Rebecca, our culture, our language, and our tradition are such a large makeup of who we are as people. And so, when a child is taken from that environment, they lose a sense of who they really are. And so we all know that we're grounded in that. And so, it's not just as a part of our identity, but it's just implicitly who we are.
I agree. And ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, was put in place as a result of, the genocidal war that was waged against our people through the boarding school era. So ICWA is a very important policy, and it's something we have to keep an eye on as Indian people. Are there other things at the conference that you think we should highlight?
Well, I think there is so many things. I think as Indigenous people, we could probably talk about this all day. But I think, the theme around defending sovereignty is all intercorrelated to what we do each and every day as legislators, as tribal nations. I remind people all the time that tribal nations are not monolithic. There's uniqueness to each of us. But when it comes to policy, when it comes to how we build those allies and educate people or the world, quite honestly, of who we are as Indigenous people, this affords us, from a policy perspective, to make sure that we strengthen those relationships and make sure we educate people and remind them that they have a trustee obligation to us. When you talk about, even, for example, like previously VAWA, it got reauthorized after 2000, a long stint of reauthorization waiting since 2013. It's finally reauthorized because our Indigenous brothers and sisters in Alaska and in Maine did not have the same afforded protections. And so it also requires resources. It's not enough to just reauthorize something and say everything's going to turn out. As we robustly exercise our sovereignty, there needs to be resources to help build court codes, to adjudicate, to make sure that all of those things, that infrastructure is in place. And that requires consultation, that requires engagement, and that requires us reminding our trustee of their obligation and making sure that we bring those critical resources back to our tribal communities.
And the Violence Against Women Act, also known as VAWA, is something that is very critical in Indian country because it gives us some degree of jurisdiction and control, but also addresses some of the invisibility around our men and women in Indian country that are harmed.
Indeed.
All the time. What about specifically your tribal nation? What are some of the things that you're engaged in that you're really excited about? Well,
it's just nice to be. I don't know if the pandemic will ever truly end, but it's nice to be on the other side of it, where tribal nations are starting to manage things differently. I think we learned. This pandemic taught us a lot about who we were and the resiliency and how Native American communities actually responded to it. But there was a lot of growth, especially for my tribal nation. We're in a rural community located in Wisconsin, although we're not originally from Wisconsin. We've been in Wisconsin for less than a couple hundred years. Our ceded territory was upstate New York. So for us, it was like building infrastructure. So even pre-pandemic, we decided that, that public health and safety was critical to our tribal nation because we're rural. We have our police officers are cross-deputized. However, it's a vast responsibility that goes into it to the health and safety of my citizens. So we looked at we partnered with a local municipality to build to bring broadband. So my tribe initiated and engaged in about 56 miles and on a tribal reservation. That's pretty significant of infrastructure of, the fiber optic. And we connected with a local telephone company and they administer the service. But also because, we've recently gotten approval for FCC licenses to bring cell towers. And it's just not to improve cell phone service. It's for public safety. I think a lot of people don't realize that. And currently one of the challenges we have is our 911 calls are going to a jurisdiction that doesn't govern us and doesn't respond to us. So it's really critical that we bring those kinds of infrastructure needs to our tribal community, where also, along with the other 10 other tribes of Wisconsin, we're building an adolescent wellness and treatment facility, which is really one of my, I consider one of my legacies and one of my, something that's near and dear to my heart. It's an adolescent, culturally centric in treatment facility. We're still in a pandemic, but there's an endemic issue of the opioid crisis that is existing within our tribal communities all over the United States. But specifically youth as young as 9 years old in the perils of addiction. So we knew that we were going to trust in our own healing. So we decided collectively that we were going to build an adolescent in-treatment facility that was culturally centric, where our young people could reclaim who they were and the invisibility or some of the confusion about Indigenous people and their culture and their language and their traditions, a place where it's safe for them to weigh in and receive Western care, but with Indigenous inherent ceremonies and practice of, burning sage and caring for other things, land stewarding, building a vegetable garden, doing basic things and helping them come to healing. So our theme for our treatment center is it's their journey to healing, because it's their 4 seasons. And it's not just specific to the actual youth. We're going to do wraparound services so that the family also will heal, because we know that intergenerationally, there's a lot of intergenerational trauma that exists. Talked about previously the boarding school experience and the genocidal practices that have been imposed on Indigenous people since first contact. And so it's a lot of reclamation and truth and healing in that way.
That's amazing. And congratulations to your community for getting that off the ground. I know that's something we're working at in Shakopee, along with the 3 other Dakota tribes in Minnesota. So that's wonderful. So we've talked about a lot, some of the threats to Indian country, some court cases that could have a really big impact. Mm-hmm. You've provided some inspiring stories about ways you're addressing issues in your own tribal nation. What are, some of your greatest hopes for the future of Indian country?
I think, our youth obviously represent the brain trust of who we are. And, they're just like our generation, we represent the seeds of our ancestors, and it's cyclic that they be able to grow and thrive. Because for a long time, Indigenous communities were in survival mode, and we've now made major strides in investing in our youth, from educational endeavors to reclamation of our language and our culture. And I think we need to amplify that, because they are going to be the ones that carry on our legacies and essentially become the people that represent our tribal citizens in terms of their ongoing needs, and making sure that we continue to amplify our message to the world that against genocide, against a pandemic, against, boarding schools experiences, we're still here. We're still resilient and from a position of strength. I want to be able to let our youth see themselves as I see them. I always tell our youth, if you think that this world, you don't fit into this world, it's because you're here to create a new one for yourselves. And I think that, we know that the future is female based on the last census. And that's just collective throughout the country. But we know that it is diverse and it's inclusive. And that inclusivity includes our children. And so they will play a major role in how we bring healing, because I'm hopeful that this new generation is going to bring healing to the world by just existing and conveying who they really are and the beautiful blessings that they are to all of us.
I love that. President Holsey, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
I'm here today with Gonzo Flores, who is from the Lipan Apache tribe of Texas. He is also a representative for the Southern Plains region for NCAI. Gonzo, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Rebecca. It's a pleasure to be interviewed by the esteemed Rebecca Crook-Stanton. I love it. I'm the tribal administrator for the Lipan Apache tribe of Texas. My family's lived there in the Rio Grande Valley for about 1,000 years. Specifically, our clan has held the medicine with the peyote for the last 800. And I'm a traditional medicine man, as well as director of economic development, custodian, and everything else, it seems like. I don't know. I mean, it's trying to steward the people moving forward. Just like a lot of Indian country, our people are suffering. I want to make sure we provide answers rather than just talk.
Like many people in Indian country, you wear many hats. I think that's common. So thank you for all the work you do. We're here at NCAI this week. What are some of the issues facing your region that you're hoping to highlight and bring to NCAI to talk about?
First and foremost is the MMIW crisis that occurs in Texas. A lot of the times you hear about it in other states, but Texas is often overlooked because of the fracking and therefore the man camps that rove around the region. And you're looking at a tremendous amount of movement that goes on and a tremendous amount of trafficking. That combined with the border, you have the cartels to deal with directly. So it isn't an indirect issue when people talk about border states. It's not to say that it's not like other ones, but the Texas-Mexico border is super violent when it comes to cartels, and combine that with the man camps and the, well, let's just say there's room for improvement with the current administration in the state of Texas and their state attorney general and their law enforcement, where negotiations sometimes come to a standstill and, these ladies are still missing and murdered.
That is definitely a big issue across Indian country and something that I think all the tribes are focused on. And hopefully we can make some movement to address some of those issues. Despite, some of those heavier issues across Indian country, there's a lot of really great things going on. Can you talk a little bit about some inspiring things in your region or tribal community?
Absolutely. First and foremost, we got some of our land back, which is kind of unheard of because we're still a state recognized tribe. We're not federally recognized yet. And then we ceded back our own Lee Apache cemetery that we've had for officially since the 1600s by, whoever was there at the time. And so that was a huge thing because it's a nice leverage point, because working with the other tribes in the area, the Kickapoos to the north and the Tequas to the west and the Alabama Cochetta in the east, to show that even in this atmosphere of anti-Indian everything, that, it's still possible to work out some solutions. And it was a win-win between the tribe as well as the Big Bin alliances, their conservation groups. It's more than just reclaiming our land. It's about environmental restoration.
That's wonderful. Congratulations on getting that land back. I think that's something all of us tribes need to focus on for sure. So we're here at NCI this week. What are you most looking forward to about the conference and some of the events going on?
I was very moved by the Jim Thorpe presentation last night during the reception, as well as seeing a lot of tribal leaders I haven't seen in person in a very long time. When I was running our caucus meeting yesterday, there was some very, I can say old, they said not to call them old, from Kiowa Nation and Sac Fox. And they looked at me at first and they went, "Gonzo, you cut your hair. It's about time you cleaned up." So it was pretty funny. But like I said, it was great to see not just the elders, but people who are still in the fight, who've been with NCAI for 45 years. And we voted to have another meeting today, which is unheard of as caucuses go sometime. But it was good. It was that. And I'm always amazed at the amount of sharing of information, as no matter what you think about a particular group or tribe or whatever, I have already walked away saying, wow, there is not just room under the big teepee, that people in the end, they really know that all sovereignty is in trouble. So that's been very optimistic for me, where I thought there'd be more contentious issues. Even the contentious issues, it didn't go away, but everybody's decided to cooperate because there's bigger fish to fry.
Well, as we look to the future here in Indian country, can you share with me maybe like one of your hopes and dreams for the future of Indian country or your tribal nation?
Well, of course, obviously being federally recognized is always a good one. But I think the bigger issue for us, especially when it comes to the environment and plant medicine in particular, is to develop a consortium of tribes that are in charge of the power grid and utilities in the area. And we have some initiatives that, of course, I'm stewarding, but nonetheless, that they are about green energy and helping reduce the destruction with the aquifer in the Permian Basin, as well as providing direct funding for our own version of the MMIW department at Department of Interior.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us today, Gonzo. I appreciate your insight and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hokahe and take care.
Hello, everyone. I'm here with Chief Executive Melanie Benjamin from the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. Chief Benjamin, thank you for being here so much.
Bonjour, Anin Anishinaabe Duke, Melanie Benjamin, and I am the Chief Executive, the elected tribal chairwoman for the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe in East Central Minnesota.
Well, we are so glad to have you here. We're here at NCAI, and there are a lot of really exciting things going on. You're here as your tribal leader, tribal nation delegate. What are you looking forward to doing while you're here at NCAI?
What I always look forward to when I'm at the National Congress of American Indians is to actually network with our federal partners, with other tribal leaders that are dealing with the same kinds of issues that we deal with back in Minnesota at the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, and just meeting up with friends and making new friends, because we're all here today to make sure that we learn, we experience the best practices so we can bring those back home.
I agree. It's so wonderful to be here with all of our friends, but also I think that networking is so vital. So in your community, what are some of the issues that are in the front of your mind as you're here at NCAI?
Nickel mining is probably one of the worst mining practices there is. We are really concerned that they will leave nothing but devastation in our area, and how that impacts the watersheds, our natural resources, our animals, our people, and of course, most importantly, the water. The water is life. And so we have a big fight ahead of us, and we ask for a lot of support and prayers so we can make sure that we continue our duty to protect Mother Earth.
You know, I think that's one of the things I like about being at NCAI is climate change is a big topic around here, and rightfully so, because it impacts Native American communities disproportionately to other communities and communities of color, right? And I think a lot of tribes are in the forefront of leading environmental initiatives. What are some of the things you're doing at Mille Lacs to keep the environment healthy and safe?
Number one, we live on the shores of the Lake Mille Lacs, one of the best walleye fishing lakes in the state of Minnesota. And we took our treaty rights all the way up to the Supreme Court in the 90s. And one of our responsibilities is to protect that olga, the walleye that's in that lake, and all of the other species of fish. And I think that's one of the things we have to look at. What is climate change doing to the lake and how that sustains us? Because that precious resource that the Money Duke gave us is something that we always have to make sure we protect. And so, of course, we co-manage with the state of Minnesota. We look to our elders to remind us of practices that we as Anishinaabe have to follow to make sure we protect the walleye and the other species in the lake. And you think about our plants and our trees, and because of climate change, many of our trees are migrating north. So some of the species that were in our area are no longer there because of climate change. And it took the rest of the world to kind of catch up to what indigenous leaders have been saying for generations.
I agree. There's a lot of wisdom and knowledge in our Indigenous communities. You know, despite a lot of the issues that Indigenous communities face, we are a resilient people and have a lot of great initiatives going on, great things to look forward to. What's something that inspires you or that you look forward to about Indian country in our future?
I think about the future generations. And when you come to a convention like National Congress of American Indians, you see all the talented Anishinaabe people, the ones that are fighting for their rights and their resources back at home. And being able to be a part of that is very inspiring. And I want to make sure that I leave that legacy for our young people, that they're excited, that they're ready to protect our homelands.
Well, Chief Executive Benjamin, thank you so much for being here. I think you are an inspiration to many of our youth and a mentor to many, including me. So thank you for that mentorship. And I hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy the conference.
Thank you. And the same to you as well. Miigwech.
I'm here with Rob Sanderson Jr. of Alaska. He represents the Alaska region as the alternate area vice president for NCAI. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm doing all right.
Thanks for being here with us today. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my native name is, the Haida name is Gusawa. That means talk too much. And like you said, my tax-paying name is Rob Sanderson Jr. And I serve as the Alaska Area VP. And back home in our territories, I serve as the second vice president of the Tlingit Haida Central Council, Tribes of Alaska. We are the largest tribe in the state of Alaska with approximately 34,000 enrolled members.
Wow, that's a lot of people. Alaska is one of the largest regions in the NCAI region with, I think, representing the most tribes. Can you talk a little bit about your region and some of the issues that are important to you?
Yeah, right now, Alaska stands at 229 federally recognized tribes. I live in the southeast region, the southern part of Alaska. And right now, a lot of our issues threatening our sovereignty in the state of Alaska is the Alaska Native corporations going after federal funds, trying to seek federal recognition as tribes. And that's something that we're going to continue to push back on tribal leadership. And to me, that's the biggest threat facing the Alaskan tribes today, is that large Native corporations are truly, really seeking tribal recognition status. And if that comes, if they were to get that, then that will water down our sovereignty, our funding. And to me, that's just another way of making tribes disappear. I mean, our own people are our own enemy. That's the way I look at it. People view it differently. Everybody has their own views, but those are my views. You can't be a director on the ANC and be a tribal leader at the same time. I just don't know how you do that. I don't ride defense. I strictly stick on the tribal side of issues. In my position, my tribe, we are pushing back on them. So we'll just have to see where that goes.
Thank you. Despite some of the issues facing Indian country and our efforts to defend our sovereignty, there's still a lot of really inspiring and empowering things going on that show the resilience of Indian people in the good direction we're headed in. Can you talk a little bit about some of the inspiring things going on in your region?
Yeah, one thing, a lot of our people say is that, our water, our food, and I'll go along with food sovereignty. Without food sovereignty, we have no sovereignty at all. And this is just my personal take on it. The difference between food security and food sovereignty is that food security, you're able to jump in your car and go down to the local grocery store and buy whatever you need and bring it home. That's food security. Food sovereignty is being able to protect your indigenous food that our ancestors have been living off of and drinking water from for millennia. And so that's the difference between food sovereignty and food security. And so anyway, just recently, in protecting our food sovereignty, we had fishery meetings up in the state of Alaska, in Anchorage, Alaska, where we recently had a series of meetings with the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council, and we were able to acquire a tribally designated seat on the advisory panel to the North Pacific. And so that's the first ever designated seat on that federal fishery. And we're not stopping there. We're looking to push for 2 seats on the advisory panel, also on the main council. And that's the largest, most powerful federal fishing group in the United States. The only one that trumps that is NOAA, but NOAA's everywhere. And all that falls under the Department of Commerce, National Marine Fisheries. But the main player that sets policy for our fisheries up there is the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council. So we're able to get a seat on that. So that really helps us in protecting our food sovereignty, at least from the sea. And next, we need to get seats on the Board of Fish and the Board of Game. So that's our next big fight up there, is to seek seats, permanent seats on these different boards that control our way of life up there, hunting, fishing. And then recently, the state of Alaska finally recognized tribes through the legislature. And it was signed off by Governor Donald last year. And so now the state of Alaska has to recognize tribes as So that was a good victory for us. And there was a lot of players that were involved in that. And so kudos to them. There's too many for me to name. But our very own President Peterson was one of the main players, though.
That's great. Congratulations on making that progress. We're here at NCAI this week. There are a lot of events going on and lots of great sessions. What's something you look forward to most about being here at NCAI?
Well, I'm all about youth leadership. Today I was asked to help the youth conduct their elections at 4:00 for their youth commission here, and I agreed to it. We have nobody in there from our area that's actually running for it, so they asked me to help.
That's great. Rob, thank you so much for being here, and enjoy your week at NCAI.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for joining me for the Native Minnesota podcast. For more episodes, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also visit our website, understandnativemn.org, to learn more about our campaign's work to improve the Native narrative in Minnesota's public schools.